When the law firm's perjury came to light, I took the fall for my wife, only after being released from prison, when I overheard her whispering with her assistant, did I realize she was already pregnant with his child. I was merely a pawn. I closed $1 million deal, yet she fired me, citing my blemish on the firm's reputation, and gave the credit to her assistant. I threw the divorce papers at her with a cold laugh. The trial was imminent, and all the key evidence was in my hands. The day I was released from Midvale facility, my wife didn't come to pick me up. While I was away, the firm had relied solely on her, so she must have gotten busy, and lost track of the date. That's why I didn't call her. I took a cab home alone, planning to surprise her. Arriving at the doorstep of the home I hadn't seen in a year, my heart pounded with excitement. Just as I was about to knock, the sounds of a man and a woman intertwined reached me from inside. My wife's passionate moans, accompanied by a man's suppressed gasps, assaulted my ears. The sounds gradually subsided, their conversation then drifted out. That idiot Marcus. I just cried a bit in front of him, and he actually believed it was my mistake. He eagerly ran off to take the fall. He's due back in a couple of days. Calculating the time, honestly. My wife's assistant, Ethan, sounded utterly brazen. Let him come back, who cares? He obediently took the fall for me, for a whole year. Whenever I think of that foolish look on his face, sacrificing himself for love, I just want to laugh. Grace whined softly, complaining slightly. This kind of thing absolutely can't happen again. If you hadn't taken money to commit perjury back then, I wouldn't have had to pay those millions. Besides, I was already pregnant with your child at the time. If anything had gone wrong, would you have wanted me and the baby to visit you in state? The call ended, and quiet returned to the room. I slowly withdrew my hand from the doorknob, chilled to the bone. A year ago, evidence for a major case went missing, causing us to lose a lawsuit we should have easily won. Sterling, Reed faced massive compensation claims, and Grace would have been criminally charged. Grace cried hysterically in front of me, saying she'd made a false statement in a moment of confusion. She frantically said she didn't want to go to prison and asked if I could take the fall for her. We were newly married then, and seeing my wife's pale, haggard face, and the barely a month-old child in her womb, I agreed without a second thought. My colleagues were stunned, urging me not to do it, warning that serving time would leave a permanent blemish on my record, and that I shouldn't be a sucker. My parents were distraught. It aged them overnight, but nothing could deter my devotion to my wife. I pulled every string, finding the best attorney to defend me. In the end, I took the fall for my wife on grounds of gross negligence, resulting in a 1-year sentence. A month after I went to prison, my wife told me she'd accidentally miscarried. I simply comforted her, saying we could always have another child. With swollen red eyes, she told me she'd wait for my return. I thought I was a husband, a pillar of strength, protecting my loved one and my child. Turns out, I not only took the blame for her lover, but was also cuckolded, and served a year in prison. How ridiculous. After composing myself, I took a taxi back to the front of Midvale facility. I used the guard's landline phone to call Grace. When learned I was released, her voice chirped excitedly, telling me to wait there, and she'd rush from the firm to pick me up. All the way home, I acted as if everything was normal. Grace drove my car, making small talk and asking about my well-being. Her tone was like a completely different person, compared to an hour ago at home. I looked out the window, pretending not to see the condom wrapper tucked in the car seat's crevice. Honey, tomorrow there's a partnership deal with Apex that you'll have to handle personally, Grace said apologetically while waiting at a red light. Apex was a multinational corporation, ranking among the top 500 globally. For them to approach us themselves meant it had to be a huge deal. Even if we were getting a divorce, I couldn't turn down money. Seeing me readily agree, Grace seemed to let out a sigh of relief. I closed my eyes to rest, not seeing the flicker of triumph in her eyes. The global deal negotiations lasted an entire day. I was swamped, battling a stomach ache and high temperatures, running around all day. Back at Sterling, Reed. As I pushed open the conference room door, I froze. There was Grace, a partner, holding Ethan's hand, placing a stack of bonus checks as thick as her fist into his hand. Ethan, Sterling, Reed wouldn't be where it is today without your invaluable contributions, she said. All the profits this year are yours. Suddenly, colleagues gathered around, flattering the two, with, Ethan, our firm definitely has a boundless future. Exactly, Ms. Grace truly has an eye for talent. She and attorney are more in sync than a married couple. I scoffed. A partnership deal. It was just an excuse to get me out of the way. The only partners at Sterling Reed were me and her, and the profits were shared among partners. She merely wanted to give my share of the profits to her lover. Ethan seemed to notice me by chance, feigning surprise. "Mr. Marcus, why are you just getting here?" he said. "We all thought you weren't coming today, so we started the meeting early." "Sorry about that." He said he was sorry, but his eyes gleamed with blatant triumph. He even waved the bonus checks in his hand at me. Hearing this, Grace didn't bother to explain for me. Instead, her tone grew impatient. "What kind of deal takes you an entire day to handle? You are so slow," she continued. "Since you're here, hand over that Apex case to Ethan. He's been more involved this past year, and is more familiar with the process than you." I didn't move, just looked at her calmly, waiting for what she'd say next. Grace seemed to choke on my cold gaze, and her tone softened slightly. "Marcus, after all, you haven't been in touch with work for a year. You can follow Ethan first to get back into the swing of things." She paused, adding, "And because of your situation, it really has affected Sterling Reed's reputation. Having you not take on cases for now is also for the firm's best interest." Listening to Grace's seemingly reasonable orders, I scoffed inwardly. What a grand accusation. She was using the firm to coerce me, implying that if I didn't accept, I'd be disregarding everyone's interests. But the truth wasn't as she claimed. Apex chose Sterling Reed this time because of my reputation. They chose me right after my release from prison because Mr. Robert, Apex CEO, believed in my capabilities and trusted me with the case the most. But this case involved international finance, and I'd pulled an all-nighter to sort through it last night. Now, it was about to close, and the deposit paid to Sterling Reed was $10 million. I just felt it wasn't worth it for me. When wanted to open a law firm, I unhesitatingly gave up my job at the courthouse. I put all my savings into building it with her from scratch, but she wasn't from a professional background. She didn't even understand basic legal knowledge, let alone how to run a law firm. So, for all these years, Sterling Reed's operations, big and small, were managed and overseen by me alone. When we struggled financially, my parents even sold the family home to help us out. I worked tirelessly for nearly 10 years, which is how Sterling Reed achieved its current scale. But how dare Ethan, a mere assistant, take everything from me? If I hadn't overheard Grace and Ethan's conversation the day I was released, I would probably still be kept in the dark. In other people's eyes, I was an utter fool. I'd worked for over a decade, not only doing all the hard work for someone else to claim the prize, but even serving time for her lover. I took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, I'll do as you say." Ethan's face brightened when he heard me agree, but he still feigned humility. "Mr. Marcus, how could I possibly handle your case?" he said. "It's just that you've just got out of the clink and aren't familiar with anything, so I just wanted to give you a hand." Grace comforted him softly. "What are you saying, Ethan? You're a talented graduate who studied abroad. This case is a piece of cake for you." Watching the two exchange glances as if no one else was there, I almost burst out laughing. When I first hired Ethan, he couldn't even answer the most basic legal statutes, but was newly pregnant then and said she needed an assistant to give her a helping hand. So, I turned a blind eye. Not only did Grace give him a generous salary, but they were inseparable. Now that I think about it, they must have gotten together even before Ethan joined the firm. To make it easier to meet, they were audacious enough to openly flirt right under my nose. Married for 10 years, it felt like I was only truly getting to know Grace today. After comforting Ethan, Grace's expression changed as she turned to me. "Marcus, what is this attitude?" she snapped. "Been in state so long you've forgotten how to speak normally." Her voice rising. "You make a face just when I ask you to hand over a case. If hadn't spoken up for you, I would have already kicked you, an ex-con, out of Sterling Reed." Grace seemed to have forgotten who begged me to take the fall for her. I thought of my love for her, and the child in her womb. I ignored that such a crime, once on my record, would ruin my career. Others might not know the real reason, but how could Grace not know? Now, I had become a burden to Sterling Reed, an ex-con in her words. Grace grew more agitated, as if I truly were a villain of unspeakable crimes. Amidst incessant accusations, I walked up to Ethan. Everyone's eyes followed me and Ethan, watching with anticipation, waiting to see us clash. But I smiled. From my briefcase, I pulled out a partner transfer agreement and tossed it onto the table in front of Ethan. "Yes, you've worked so hard and deserve the credit. I'll let you be a partner too." At that, everyone in the room froze. looking at me with disbelief. After all, they all knew how much I had sacrificed for Sterling Reed to achieve its current success. Mr. Marcus, you built our firm from scratch. Don't be impulsive over one case. Grace also thought I was threatening her, trying to embarrass her in front of everyone. She immediately flushed with anger. Marcus, what are you messing around with? Every word I said was true. Don't you forget, I am the actual owner of Sterling Reed. Looking at Grace's face, flushed red with anger, I just found it ridiculous. I had given the partner position to her lover, the father of her child. Wasn't this exactly what she wanted? Ethan held the partner transfer agreement, his greed barely concealed in his eyes, yet he still tried to put on a selfless facade. Mr. Marcus, you didn't give me this position just because you're angry, did you? He said. Please don't misunderstand, Ms. Grace only asked me to temporarily take on cases for you to protect Sterling Reed's reputation, he continued. Besides, how could I ever take your place? You built this firm from scratch. How could a newcomer like me be in such a position? As he spoke, he made a show of trying to return the transfer agreement, but his hand never actually extended it, as if afraid I'd actually take it back. I chuckled lightly, patting his shoulder. Ethan, if I gave it to you, just take it. Don't be modest, I added. Besides, with your ability, reaching this position is only a matter of time. It's good that everyone's here to witness it. At that, Ethan no longer declined, clutching the transfer agreement tightly, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Having said my piece, I turned and walked straight out, watching's giddy look. No one saw the similar triumph in my eyes. Grace was now completely dedicated to Ethan and their child, utterly unaware of how complicated the Apex case was. Apex had searched for attorneys, but no one dared to take it on, as it lacked the key evidence needed to overturn the previous outcome. This crucial evidence had not yet been submitted. It was solely in my possession. Without me, their cash cow would quickly turn into a time bomb, and didn't seem to know that the partner's position wasn't so easy to hold. As Reed's key figure, he would have to bear all responsibilities. Apex had paid a $10 million deposit this time, but if they lost the case, they would face not only a full refund, but also 10 times the compensation, and as an ex-con, I naturally had no obligation to warn them. Back home, I immediately began packing my belongings non-stop. My hand brushed against an old cardboard box, and an old photo album spilled out. It contained photos of Grace and me from college. Back then, Grace would lean against me, full of hope for the future and love for each other. As for me, I gave up a guaranteed postgraduate admission opportunity to pursue graduate studies in the same city as her. She knew how much I had given up for her, so the day she willingly proposed to me, she swore she would never make me regret it. And when I was working tirelessly for Sterling Reed, she told me, Grace will be Marcus' only reliance. For 10 years of our marriage, she didn't want children, and I accommodated her every wish. When she finally agreed to have a child, I was overjoyed. After she became pregnant, I spoiled her even more, letting her hire assistants. As long as she was happy, it wasn't until I learned that it was all a deception that I finally came to my senses. When did Grace start to change? Was it when she begged me to take the fall and go to prison for her lover, or when she gave birth to someone else's child? I no longer knew. The rage in my heart, mixed with a sharp stab of pain, almost burst from my chest. Just then, I heard the sound of the fingerprint scanner at the door. I looked up and saw Grace, reeking of alcohol, return, and behind her was another person, Ethan, with his arm around her waist. Carrying her bag, the door was pushed open, and the two walked in, leaning on each other. When they saw me and the old photo album spread on the floor, Grace's drunkenness sobered slightly, but the scorn and impatience in her eyes intensified. She shook off Ethan's arm and staggered toward me. Weren't you so tough just now? She slurred. If he's so capable, prove it. Don't wait here for me to come back and coax you. Ethan pointed at the photo album on the coffee table, hypocritically speaking. Grace, Mr. Marcus knows he made a mistake. He's waiting for you to apologize first, he said. See? He even took out your old photos. Hearing this, Grace glanced down at the photo album, smugly. Don't think these old things will soften my heart, she said. I am telling you, I am only doing this for Ethan's sake. As she spoke, she reached for the photo album. Before she could finish, I raised my hand, frowned, and without a word, tossed the photo album into the trash can. Cleaning up trash, I said. Don't flatter yourself. Unwilling to deal with them any longer, I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door, but's expression instantly hardened, and she blocked me. Marcus, what exactly do you want? You embarrassed me at Sterling Reed during the day, and now you want to defy me, she shrieked. I advise you to face reality. You're no longer the once prestigious Marcus, the top-tier attorney. You're just an ex-con who just got out, a useless piece of garbage. Ethan quickly stepped forward and pulled her back, hypocritically trying to calm her down. Grace, calm down. Don't pay any mind to Marcus. He just got out. He's not in a good mood. Not in a good mood. I think prison rotted his brain. He dragged Sterling Reed down and ruined my reputation. What else does he want? Ruined your reputation, I repeated, my voice filled with deep sarcasm. Grace, ask your conscience, who truly ruined Sterling Reed's reputation? Who was truly at fault in that case? Who hid like a coward, watching someone else take the fall for him? Grace's face instantly went pale, but her mouth remained defiant. You willingly agreed back then. You begged to take the fall. I didn't force you, she paused, adding, besides, even if I made a mistake, you're my husband. Isn't it only natural for you to take the fall for me? Perhaps realizing her tone wasn't good, and that taking the fall was indeed her fault, she paused, and her voice softened again, feigning grievance. Besides, I promised you that I'd compensate you when you got out of prison. Compensate? I laughed in exasperation at her shameless expression, bent down, picked up the dust-covered wedding photo from the floor, and held it up to her face. Compensate me with what? With the money you made from having affairs with this worthless loser, who only climbed the ladder because of you. Grace seemed to hit a nerve, screaming and lunging forward to claw at my face. Shut up, she shrieked. Don't you dare say that about him, Marcus. You are just jealous. Jealous that Ethan is younger, more capable. Her eyes wild, she spouted nonsense. I'm telling you, Ethan is 1,000,000 times better than you. He's the one who can give me happiness. You're just a worthless ex-con. I've had enough of you. Watching her disgraceful behavior as she hurled insults at me to defend her lover, the last bit of lingering affection in my heart was utterly crushed. Fine, let's get divorced then. I pulled out the divorce papers I had prepared, and threw them in Grace's face. Grace froze instantly, pointing at me, trembling with rage. Fine, divorce then. Marcus, don't you dare regret this. Ethan could barely suppress the smile on his face, but he still pretended to advise me. Mr. Marcus, are you sure you don't want to reconsider? If you leave Grace, can you even survive? He went on, our firm just landed the Apex case. We can ruin you in this circle with just a word. What's more, you now have a criminal record and are an ex-con. What law firm would dare to hire you? I let out a cold laugh. He wanted me to believe that everything I had now was bestowed upon me by Grace, and that without her, I was nothing. Only then would I continue to work like a dog for them, at Sterling Reed. Only then could they truly reap the benefits. Grace also grew smug. Yes, Marcus, without me, who else would want you? She sneered. Ethan will have your case done in less than a day. It's about to close. Then, Robert will directly transfer 10 million. Do you really think Sterling Reed can't function without you? Hearing this, I just laughed coldly to myself. Transferring money. Doomed. Without the evidence in my hands, this case would be impossible to win. Mr. Robert had a huge empire. Offending him would not only prevent them from getting rich, but might make it impossible for them to survive in this industry. Grace was leaning against Ethan, bragging incessantly. When her cell phone suddenly rang, she glanced at the caller ID, and the triumph on her face intensified. She waved the cell phone screen at me, tauntingly. See? Mr. Robert's calling now, she continued. Once that 10 million is in my hands, Ethan and I are going on a lavish world tour. You can just rot in a dingy rental and die. As she spoke, she deliberately put it on speakerphone, wanting me to hear clearly, but the next second, Mr. Robert's enraged roar came through the phone. What the hell are you doing? You useless fools, he bellowed. The lawsuit is lost. I am going to make you pay until you're bankrupt. You'll rot in prison. The smile on Grace's face instantly froze. What? She stammered. How could it be lost, Mr. Robert? There's no way a case handled by Sterling Reed could have problems. You must have made a mistake somewhere. This is absolutely impossible. Grace's face was ashen, and she murmured, still in disbelief, impossible. The facts are right in front of my damn eyes. Mr. Robert roared. I am telling you, it's clearly stated in the contract, breach of contract penalties and compensation, you won't get away with a single cent less. Otherwise, just wait for the courthouse summons. The call was ruthlessly hung up, the room fell into a deadly silence. The two people who had been so triumphant and arrogant moments ago now seemed to have had their spines removed, deflated and slumped to the floor. Ethan's face was utterly pale, clearly scared stiff by Mr. Robert's roar. Grace stared blankly at the shattered cell phone screen on the floor, then, as if stung by something, she suddenly looked up and stared at me. Marcus, it must have been you, she shrieked. You resigned, and immediately after, Mr. Robert's case was lost. How could that be such a coincidence? Were you upset that Ethan and I were going to live a good life, and deliberately tampered with the documents? I frowned, finding her ugly display of blaming me in turn utterly absurd. I had warned her that for someone of Ethan's caliber to take on such a major case, would only be a hot potato. She hadn't listened, and now that there was a problem, she wanted to slander me. Ethan beside her also clutched at a straw, quickly getting up to agree. That's right, you must have wanted to drag us down with you, and then start a new firm, drag you down. I scoffed. Are you even worthy? I added, besides, even if I did start a new firm, it wouldn't have anything to do with you anymore. We're already divorced. A flicker of malice crossed Grace's eyes, and she turned and rushed into the home office, pulling out a document. Has nothing to do with me, she scoffed. Then open your eyes wide and see what this is. I looked down. It was a non-compete agreement I had personally signed the year we got married. At the time, I was completely devoted to her, never imagining we would end up like this. It must be that she had planned everything from the start. Grace looked at my reaction, as if she already had the upper hand. It's written in black and white on here, as long as you're still in this industry, you can't touch anything related to law, or you'll have to pay damages for breach of contract. She smirked. I am telling you, you won't get away with a single cent less than those 10 million. I clenched my fists, wanting to tear this woman, Grace, apart. I really underestimated your shamelessness. Ethan also chipped in, his tone sinister. Marcus, don't forget you have a criminal record now. 1. No one will want you, and 2. You've made a lot of money, working at Grace's firm all these years. He continued, if I were you, I'd just pay up obediently. Why make such a scene? They teamed up, trying to use this non-compete agreement to force me to submit. They wanted to squeeze every last drop out of me. What a clever scheme. I smiled faintly and nodded. Fine. The two exchanged glances, clearly not expecting me to agree so easily. But I have one condition. I bent down and took another stack of documents from my briefcase. It wasn't money, it was printed standard printer paper. This is a list of your expenses over our 10 years of marriage, totaling 13 million. How do you plan to pay it back? Grace, who had been arrogant moments before, instantly turned ashen at the sight of the document. 13 million. Are you crazy? How could it be that much? Am I crazy? You can see for yourself. At the top were the bank statements, clearly showing records of large transfers, with Ethan as the recipient. The time was the year I went to prison. Following that were various spending records, luxury items, upscale restaurants, 5-star hotels. All the dates matched Grace's so-called business trips. Grace had also intermittently bought houses and luxury cars for Ethan over the years. Which of these things wasn't bought with marital assets? I asked. In other words, which of these things wasn't bought with my money? Grace was speechless. The evidence was conclusive. She couldn't deny it. What? You spent all the money on Ethan, and now you have no money left. Were you counting on getting rich from this Apex case? I scoffed. Too bad. Your beautiful dream is over. Sterling. Reed's bankruptcy liquidation won't even be enough to pay Apex compensation. What are you going to use to pay me back? Watching grit her teeth, yet powerless against me, I couldn't be bothered to argue further with them. As for the other divorce matters, I'll have my attorney contact you. You're on your own now, for the next few days. Grace unexpectedly quieted down for a while. I thought that presenting that evidence would be enough to make them back down, or at least keep them quiet for a bit, but I had underestimated Grace's shamelessness. First, several long-standing clients I'd worked with called with vague excuses, terminating their cooperation with me. Then, my cell phone began receiving strange harassment texts and calls. The filthy language was unbearable to hear. Finally, some revelations about me started going viral online. The content was largely similar, portraying me as a total jerk, a man who would stoop to any means to get revenge on his ex-wife. They claimed I abused my position to steal Sterling Reed's secrets, maliciously sabotaging major cases I had previously handled, causing severe losses to clients. Even more viciously, someone exaggerated my time served in prison, claiming I was ruthless and lacked professional ethics, doing anything for money, as had implied. No one would work with me anymore. My reputation plummeted in just a few days, just as I was at my wit's end. A courthouse summons was delivered to me. Grace listed a slew of charges against me: malfeasance, leaking trade secrets, unfair competition, slander. It spanned several pages, but the core demand was only one: for me to bear full responsibility for Mr. Roberts' case being lost and to compensate Sterling Reed for all resulting losses, an astronomical sum. Looking at the cold print on the summons and Grace's name signed as the plaintiff, I, ironically, calmed down completely. I found the plaintiff from the case where I took the fall a year ago and sent him a letter. Since she chose to resolve this through legal means, then we would settle everything in court. On the day of the trial, the public gallery was packed with people, including former colleagues I knew and media reporters. Grace sat at the plaintiff's bench, her eyes slightly red, looking utterly wronged. Grace's hired attorney was a shrewd operator, known in the industry for his eloquence. In just a few sentences, he painted me as a terrible person, psychologically twisted by marital failure and career setbacks, who would sacrifice client interests and Sterling Reed's reputation to get revenge on his ex-wife. He spoke with conviction, and the evidence seemed conclusive. Next, it was Grace's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand, and began to accuse me of my alleged crimes. Crying and wailing, she portrayed herself as an independent and strong woman, struggling to support Sterling Reed, but burdened by an ungrateful ex-husband. She twisted the facts, claiming how I constantly tried to sabotage Ethan out of jealousy for his talent, and how after the divorce, I held a grudge and deliberately set up a scheme to ruin Mr. Roberts' case. She even insinuated that I had a criminal record and bad character. Grace's attorney finished his eloquent argument, and walked triumphantly back to the plaintiff's bench. Grace, at the opportune moment, dabbed at her non-existent tears with a tissue, and exchanged a knowing glance with Ethan. For a moment, all the evidence seemed to point to me, firmly nailing me to the pillory of shame as the culprit. The courtroom fell silent, and everyone's eyes were fixed on me. I slowly stood up, my gaze calmly sweeping over Grace and Ethan at the plaintiff's bench. I then subtly glanced at a corner of the public gallery. There sat a gaunt middle-aged man with a blank expression. His name was David, and he once had a happy family. A year ago, David's daughter, Emily, tragically died in a drunk driving hit-and-run case. It was because Ethan took a bribe from the defendant, and provided false testimony that the perpetrator was still walking free. David's wife, unable to bear the blow, committed suicide. He himself suffered a mental breakdown, and was sent to a psychiatric facility. His presence today was perhaps due to the letter I sent him. All the accusations made by the plaintiff are lies. The failure of the Apex case originated from an unjust case, a year ago, personally engineered by Mr. Ethan, who sits at the plaintiff's bench. Grace and Ethan's bodies almost imperceptibly stiffened at the same time. Mr. Ethan, a year ago, the hit-and-run case involving Mr. David's daughter, Emily, you were the primary handling assistant, so you must remember it clearly, correct? Ethan's eyes darted, and his Adam's apple bobbed. I remember, he stammered. Then, please explain why the crucial intersection surveillance footage, which clearly showed the perpetrator's license plate number, happened to show a pixelated screen due to signal interference during those key seconds when it was submitted to the police officers. And why was another dashcam video, provided by a witness and recording some of the perpetrator's features, accidentally formatted? How should I know that? It was clearly a technical problem. Technical problem? I scoffed. Ms. Grace, you told me at the time that these were accidents, technical malfunctions, and you asked me to assure the parties involved and accept the police officers' accidental conclusion, didn't you? Grace nodded, her face pale. Yes, it was an accident. If it was an accident, then why was the crystal clear and unsnipped original surveillance footage stored on your personal computer? And the deletion logs clearly point to Ethan's home address. I pointed at the evidence on the screen, turning to Ethan, whose face was ashen. You took a bribe from the plaintiff, personally committed perjury, and personally covered up for the killer of a young girl in the prime of her life. He's slandering me. Ethan completely lost all control. Screaming in protest, Grace also shrieked, trying to salvage the situation. Marcus, you can't slander us like this. That matter is in the past. The past. A human life. A shattered family. And you say it's in the past. I retorted. Grace, you cried and begged me to go to prison for you, threatened me with the child in your womb, and said the evidence had passed through my hands, trying to drag me into it. I've been deceived by you for so long, but did you think your dirty deeds would never see the light of day? Impossible. I connected the voice recorder to the court's playback device, and pressed the play button. The next second, the clear sound of a man and a woman talking came from the speakers. That idiot Marcus, I just cried a bit in front of him, and he actually believed it was my mistake. He eagerly ran off to take the fall. He's due back in a couple of days. Calculating the time, honestly. The recording was of the conversation between Grace and Ethan that I had overheard at the doorstep the day I was released from prison. As soon as those few sentences played, the entire courtroom erupted in an uproar. All color instantly drained from Grace's face. She looked at me in disbelief, then at the device playing the recording. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Ethan, too, was ashen-faced, his forehead covered in cold sweat. The recording continued to play. This kind of thing absolutely can't happen again. If you hadn't taken money to commit perjury back then, I wouldn't have had to pay those millions. Besides, I was already pregnant with your child at the time. If anything had gone wrong, would you have wanted me and the baby to visit you in state? Oh, and make sure your mom doesn't take the child to the firm during this time. We absolutely can't let Marcus run into them. Marital infidelity, taking the fall for her lover. The entire courtroom was now in an uproar. That woman is too vicious. No wonder Marcus wanted a divorce. Who could put up with that? So, Ethan was the real culprit all along. I knew that kind of mistake in that case wouldn't have been made by a top-tier attorney like Marcus. The recording continued, revealing Grace and Ethan's malicious schemes to squeeze the last drop of value from me, and then kick me to the curb, as well as details from the case a year ago, as the recording mentioned saving Ethan, and taking money to commit perjury. David, seated in the spectator gallery, finally couldn't sit still. So you're the ones who killed my daughter and my wife. You monsters. I'll make you pay with your lives. The incident unfolded in an instant. David broke free from his escorts, tearing through the court bailiff's blockade in what seemed like a second, and lunged straight for the plaintiff's bench. Ethan was terrified out of his wits, screaming and trying to escape, but he tripped over a startled Grace. Ethan's throat was slit in an instant. His body convulsed a few times before he collapsed lifelessly into a pool of blood. It wasn't until David, with eyes burning crimson, lunged to stab Grace that the court bailiffs finally managed to restrain him, but had still been stabbed once and passed out. I stood in the defendant's box, quietly observing everything, watching his body, his eyes wide in death, and the unconscious Grace. There was no pity in my heart, no ripple of emotion. They deserved every bit of it. The verdict came quickly. Grace's sterling Reed went bankrupt, and its assets were frozen. I no longer concerned myself with those past affairs, and began to plan my own future, establishing my own law firm. It was late that night when Grace, who had absconded from the hospital to escape justice, showed up at my door. Marcus, open the door. I know you're in there. Open up. Complaints were already coming from next door. I had no choice but to open the door. The before me bore no resemblance to her former refined self. Her eyes were sunken, her entire body emaciated beyond recognition, looking no different from a beggar on the street. Seeing me open the door, she looked as if she'd found a lifeline. She lunged forward, grabbing my leg and sobbing hysterically. Marcus. Marcus. Save me. Please, save me. I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. That bastard Ethan tricked me. I was blind. She was crying so hard, tears and snot, streaming down her face, smearing all over my pant leg. Marcus, look at me. I have nothing left now. Sterling Reed is gone. My money is gone. I don't even have a place to live. I don't want to go to prison. I really don't want to go to prison. She lifted her head, her eyes filled with desperate pleading. We were married for 10 years. When we first got together, you said you'd always protect me. You said it. She started rambling on about the past, moments I once cherished. Now nothing. but a cruel mockery. I listened expressionlessly, my heart completely unmoved, only a deepening sense of revulsion. Are you done talking? I spoke coldly, waiting for a pause in her lament. Grace froze for a moment, as if she hadn't expected me to be so cold. Marcus, let go. She clung tighter, like someone grasping at a final piece of driftwood. No, I won't let go. Marcus, you can't do this to me. How can you be so heartless? Heartless. As if I'd heard a joke, I violently pulled her off my leg, and threw her to the floor. I looked down at her, my gaze icy cold. Grace, who exactly is the heartless one here? When you and Ethan conspired to frame me, making me take the fall and go to prison for him, why didn't you consider yourself heartless? When you spent my money and used my resources, yet gave birth to another man's bastard child, why didn't you consider yourself heartless? When you stood in court, twisting the truth to ruin my reputation, even trying to send me back to state, why didn't you consider yourself heartless? Her face turned deathly pale, her lips trembling as she stammered, I was forced. It was Ethan, he made me do it. Forced you? I scoffed. I'd say you enjoyed it, wouldn't you? Relishing my contributions while seeking thrills elsewhere. Grace, wasn't this all your own doing? Do you really think regret helps anything now? My words shattered the last flicker of hope in her heart. The pleading in her eyes slowly vanished, replaced by venom and madness. Marcus, don't get too smug. Do you really think you've won? I am telling you, even if I am finished, you won't have it easy either. She abruptly scrambled to her feet. Glancing around, she rushed into the kitchen, grabbed the kitchen knife from the cabinet, a flicker of insane intent in her eyes. You ruined everything for me, so I'll ruin you too. I'll drag you down to hell with me. The next second, the front door was violently kicked open. Several officers in uniforms quickly rushed in. They quickly wrestled the still frenzied Grace to the ground. I clutched my chest, a wave of belated fear washing over me. Good thing I'd left the door unlatched, and called the police when Grace first started knocking. Even as the police officers cuffed Grace, she continued to struggle, screaming at me, her face contorted in a grotesque mask. Marcus, you bastard. I'll rot in hell. I'll haunt you even from the grave. I stood my ground, watching her, being taken away with indifference, listening as the vicious curses gradually faded, until complete silence returned to the surroundings. I slowly closed the door. In that moment, it felt as if all the past grievances, the filth, and the unbearable memories were finally shut out beyond the door. Later, I heard that Grace had taken her own life not long after being sent to state. As for me, I had completely shaken off the shadows of the past. I established my own law firm, and quickly re-established myself in the industry. Apex became one of my most steadfast partners, and more clients sought me out by reputation. Standing in my bright, modern office, overlooking the city's bustling city traffic, I knew then that my new life had truly just begun.